A young nurse saved a life. But when her powerful patient awakens with no memory, she's forced into a deadly lie. Trapped in a world of luxury and violence, she must pretend to be his everything. One wrong move could be her last. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The monitor beeped. It was the only sound in the private room, a steady, boring rhythm. Nurse Alina Rossi adjusted the IV line, her fingers careful on the man's wrist. He was just another patient. John Doe. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, a head injury from the fall that followed. Found in an alley, 3 weeks in a deep coma. She didn't look at the news. She didn't ask questions. That was rule number 1 of her new life. Don't be curious. Just do your job, collect your pay, and go home to your empty, safe little apartment. The U.S. Marshals had been clear. Alina was dead. Stella Rossi was who she was now, a nurse, a nobody. But this man, even asleep, he had a presence. Dark hair against white pillows, a face that was all sharp lines and quiet power even in stillness. She talked to him as she worked. It was a habit. Blood pressure's good today, Mr. Doe. Let's turn you okay. Gotta keep those lungs clear. Her voice was soft, a gentle monotone. She was wiping his brow when his hand moved. It was just a twitch at first. Then his fingers curled, trapping her wrist. Her breath caught. His eyes flew open. They were a dark, deep brown, confused, searching the ceiling. Then they locked onto hers. Panic shot through Alina. She hit the call button. He's awake. Room 4B, he's awake. The eyes held hers. They were full of fear and pain and something else. A desperate need. His lips parted. A rough, dry sound came out. She leaned closer. Who? He whispered. You're in the hospital. You're safe. You were hurt, she said, her witness protection training making her voice calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. He blinked, trying to focus. His gaze never left her face. It was like he was seeing a ghost, a lifeline. His grip on her wrist tightened, not hurtful but strong, terrifyingly strong. Alina, he breathed. Ice flooded her veins. How did he know her name? Her real name? She hadn't told anyone. She wore a badge that said Stella. She opened her mouth to correct him, to lie, but the doctor and 2 nurses rushed in, pulling her back from the bedside. The next 48 hours were a storm of tests. Scans, questions, neurological exams. The man, John Doe, was physically healing well, but his mind was a blank slate. Retrograde amnesia, the neurologist said. He remembered how to speak, how to eat, basic things. But his own name, his past, where he lived, gone. Except for one thing. Sir. Every time a doctor asked him a question, his eyes would dart around the room until they found her. He would point. She knows, ask her. Do you know this woman? The doctor asked for the 10th time. John Doe, no, not John Doe. She heard a detective call him Silvio after fingerprint matching, but they kept it quiet, looked at Alina with absolute certainty. A small, confused smile touched his lips. Yes, she's mine, my Alina. The world tilted. No, Alina said, her voice firm. I'm your nurse. My name is Stella. You've been very ill. But Silvio just shook his head, like a child who knew a secret. You're my Alina. I remember your voice. You talked to me. In the dark, you called me back. He was imprinting. The psychiatrist explained it. The first face he saw, the first voice he truly heard, his damaged brain had latched onto it as his only anchor to reality. He had built a story around her, a love story. Alina wanted to run. This was attention. This was a spotlight. This was the exact opposite of hiding. Then they arrived. It started with a feeling. The air in the hallway changed. It became quiet, heavy. 2 large men in very expensive, very dark suits walked past the nurse's station. They didn't ask for directions. They just knew where to go. Their eyes scanned everything, cold and empty. More men followed, taking posts at the elevator and the stairwell door. Alina was charting at the station when a hand touched her elbow. She jumped. It was David, the head of security, and he looked pale. Alina, room 4B now, and be smart. Her legs felt like wood as she walked down the hall. The 2 suit men at the door looked her over, then opened it without a word. The room was full of flowers. huge, extravagant arrangements that smelled overpowering. And in the middle of it all, sitting in the visitor's chair like a king on a throne, was an older man. He had silver hair and a face that looked kind, but his eyes were like chips of flint. He wore a ring with a dark red stone. Behind him stood a younger man, lean and tense with watchful eyes. James, she would later learn, the underboss. And on the bed, Silvio was sitting up. He looked at the older man with blank politeness. "Hello." The older man's kind face cracked with emotion. "Silvio, my boy, thank God." He stood and moved to embrace him, but Silvio stiffened, pulling back slightly. "Do I know you?" Silvio asked, his voice calm. The older man, Paul, she heard James call him Don Paul, froze. He recovered quickly, the kindness back. "I am your uncle, Paul, your family. We've been so worried. We're here to take you home." "Home?" Silvio's eyes wandered past him, searching. They found Alina in the doorway. Immediately, his whole body relaxed. A real, warm smile lit up his face. "Alina, there you are." All the flint-like eyes in the room turned to her. Don Paul looked at her as if seeing a speck of dirt on his shoe. "Who is this?" "She's my Alina," Silvio said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He held a hand out to her. "Come here, it's all right." Every instinct screamed at Alina to turn and run, but James was blocking the door now. She walked forward, her nurse's shoes silent on the floor, and stopped a few feet from the bed. Silvio took her hand, his own large and warm. He laced his fingers with hers. The gesture was possessive, certain. Don Paul's smile was strained. "Your nurse is very dedicated, Silvio, but now your family is here. We will care for you." "No," Silvio said simply. His thumb stroked the back of Alina's hand. "I stay with Alina. Where she goes, I go." "Don Silvio," James said, stepping forward, his voice respectful but firm. "This building is not secure. Your nurse cannot protect you. The people who did this are still looking." "Then protect us both," Silvio said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It was his first real command. The air in the room shifted. He might not remember who he was, but the authority in his voice was innate, a deep part of him that the bullet hadn't erased. Don Paul studied Alina's face. She kept her eyes down on the floor, a meek nurse, a nobody. Inside, she was screaming. "Of course," Don Paul said, the kindness back, oily and smooth. "Your Alina is welcome. She has taken such good care of you. It is only right she comes to the estate to see your recovery through. We will make sure she is comfortable." He turned his smile on Alina. It didn't reach his eyes. "You will come, won't you, my dear? For Silvio's health. It would mean so much to him, and to us. We are a family that rewards loyalty." It wasn't an offer. It was an order wrapped in velvet, a threat wrapped in a smile. James was staring at her, his hand resting casually near his jacket, where a bulge suggested a gun. If she said no, what would they do? Let her walk away, knowing she could talk to the police? Unlikely. She was a loose end, a problem. Her only chance was to play along, to be the confused nurse, and to find a way to escape later. She forced a small, shaky smile. She looked at Silvio, who was gazing at her with pure, trusting devotion. A devotion based on a lie. If it's best for the patient," she whispered. "Good," Don Paul said, clapping his hands together once. "It's settled. We leave tonight. James, make the arrangements discreetly." The estate was a fortress. A massive, cold stone house on a vast, gated property overlooking the city. Alina was given a room next to Silvio's. It was beautiful, like a hotel suite, but the windows didn't open fully, and she was sure the doors were monitored. Her first lesson came that evening. She was in Silvio's grand bedroom, helping him settle in. He was tired, weak from the move. She fluffed his pillows, her movements automatic. "Tell me about us," he said softly, catching her hand again. He was always touching her, seeking connection. "How did we meet?" The lie stuck in her throat. "It was ordinary," she stammered. "We met at a cafe. You spilled coffee on my shirt." It was the first thing that came to mind, a scene from a movie she'd seen. He smiled, enchanted. "I was clumsy." "Very," she said, forcing a laugh. The door opened without a knock. James walked in, followed by a maid carrying a tray. James's eyes went to their joined hands. "Don Silvio, you need to rest. The doctor is here to check you." His gaze flicked to Alina. "Nurse, a word." He led her out into the hall. When the door closed, the pleasant mask vanished. He pushed her against the wall, not hard, but with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. His face was inches from hers. "Listen carefully, Stella," he hissed, using her fake name like a curse. "You play your part, you keep him calm, you keep him happy. You are his pet, his comfort blanket. You smile, you hold his hand. You tell him sweet little stories, but remember this. You are not one of us, you are a tool. The moment you become a problem, or the moment he remembers who he really is, you disappear. Permanently. Do you understand?" Alina nodded, terror choking her. "Good," James said, stepping back, smoothing his suit. The pleasant expression returned. "He's asking for you, go back in, and smile." The charade began. Days blurred into a week. Alina was always by Silvio's side. During his physical therapy, during his meals, reading to him in the library. He was a quick learner, his body regaining strength rapidly. And his mind was sharp, absorbing everything about his new life except his past. But flashes emerged. Sometimes he'd look at a chessboard and move a piece with terrifying strategy, then blink, confused at how he knew to do that. Once, when a car backfired in the distance, he shoved Alina to the floor behind a sofa, covering her body with his eyes scanning the room like a soldier's. He didn't know why he did it. He just did. He was gentle with her always. He called her his angel, his light in the dark. He bought her expensive gifts, jewelry, silky dresses, which she accepted with a tight smile and never wore. The guilt was a physical pain in her chest. This man, this dangerous mafia boss, was falling in love with a ghost, and she was lying to him every second. One afternoon, they were in the garden. He was stronger now, walking without help. He stopped by a rose bush, plucking a perfect red bloom. He turned to her and tucked it behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek. "I don't remember my life," he said quietly, his dark eyes serious. "But I know this feeling I have when I look at you. This is the only real thing. This is what I want to build my new life on, you." Alina's heart shattered. "Silvio, you don't know me, not really." "I know enough," he said, leaning closer. "I know your kindness, your patience, the sound of your laugh, the way you bite your lip when you're worried." He was going to kiss her. She could see it. She was supposed to let him, to keep him calm. But she panicked. She turned her head, the kiss landing on her cheek. He pulled back, hurt flashing in his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It's too fast." He nodded, accepting it, always accepting her excuses. "Of course, forgive me." The pressure was cracking her. She needed to get out. She started planning. She noted the guard shifts. The camera in the hallway outside her room had a blind spot for 3 minutes at 2:15 a.m. when it panned away. The outer wall by the old greenhouse was lower. If she could get to the city, she could find a marshal, explain. Her chance came unexpectedly. Don Paul and James were called away on urgent business, a territory dispute with a rival family, she overheard. Security was still tight, but the most watchful eyes were gone. That night she waited until 2:10. She dressed in dark clothes, her heart a drum in her ears. She crept to her door, listening. Silence. She slipped out, moved through the blind spot, and darted down the servants' staircase. She made it to the kitchen, then to the side door leading to the gardens. The cold night air hit her face. Freedom. She ran across the lawn, toward the dark shadow of the greenhouse and the low wall. Her hands touched the cold stone. She was about to pull herself up when powerful arms grabbed her from behind, lifting her off her feet. A hand clamped over her mouth. "Naughty, naughty," a voice growled in her ear. It was Marco, one of James's most brutal men. He dragged her, kicking and struggling, back toward the house, not to her room, to Don Paul's study. James was there, having returned early. His face was a mask of cold fury. Don Paul sat behind the desk, sipping a drink, looking disappointed. "We treated you like a guest," Don Paul said, shaking his head. "And you try to run, to betray Silvio's trust." "I'm not his wife," Alina cried, the truth bursting out of her. "I'm just a nurse. You're holding me prisoner." "You are what he needs you to be," James snapped. He backhanded her across the face. The pain was sharp and bright. She fell to her knees. The only reason you're still breathing is because he asks for you the moment he opens his eyes. You are a tool, a useful one, but tools can be replaced if they break. Perhaps we were too soft, Don Paul mused. James, show our nurse what happens to people who are disloyal, to people who talk. James grabbed her hair, forcing her to look at the large TV on the wall. He pressed a button. Security footage played. It showed the front gate of the estate. A man in a delivery uniform was talking to a guard, laughing. A friend making a delivery. The next clip showed the same man, later in a dark warehouse. He was tied to a chair. James walked into the frame, spoke calmly to the man, then pulled out a gun. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. The sound of the gunshot was terribly loud in the quiet study. Open your eyes, James commanded. When she didn't, he yanked her hair harder. Open them. She did. The screen was black. He was skimming money. A few $100s, Don Paul said. Loyalty is everything, Elena. You are part of this family now, whether you like it or not. Your loyalty is to Silvio. You will play your part perfectly until we decide you are done. Do you understand the rules now? Tears streamed down her burning cheek. She nodded, a broken, tiny movement. Good, clean her up. Silvio must not see a mark on her, Don Paul said, turning back to his drink. James hauled her to her feet and shoved her toward the door. The next time you try to run, he whispered, his lips against her ear, I won't bring you back here. I'll take you to that warehouse. And Silvio will be told his beloved Elena ran away with another man. He'll be heartbroken, but he'll get over it. He pushed her into the care of a stern-faced maid, who cleaned her face with ice and applied makeup to the red mark. 10 minutes later, shaking like a leaf, Elena was forced to walk back into Silvio's bedroom. He was awake, sitting up in bed, the lamp on. He looked worried. Elena, I had a bad dream. I called for you. She stood there in the middle of the room, her body screaming with terror. Elena, what's wrong? He turned on the bedside light. His eyes, so soft for her, scanned her face. The makeup was good, but her eyes were red, her breathing shallow. A man like him, even a version of him that was lost, noticed fear. It was a language he knew. He held out his arms. Come here. It was the worst thing he could have said, the terrible, beautiful lie of it. She stumbled forward and let him wrap her in his arms. He held her tightly, stroking her hair. SHHH, it's all right, I'm here. Nothing will hurt you. He kissed the top of her head. I promise, no one will ever hurt you. She cried then, great, silent sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her stolen life, for the man she was betraying, for the monster who was holding her so gently. She cried because his promise felt like the safest thing in her world, and it was the most dangerous lie of all. And as she cried, something in Silvio changed. She felt it. His body tensed. His hand, which had been gently stroking her hair, stilled. His embrace became less that of a lover and more that of a protector assessing a threat. The voice that rumbled in his chest was lower, darker. It was not the voice of her confused patient. Elena, he said, the word precise. Who frightened you? She froze. She pulled back to look at him. His face was different. The soft confusion was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. The eyes that looked back at her were still brown, but they were no longer a calm pond. They were the deep, dark water under a winter bridge. He was seeing her, really seeing her for the first time, and he was seeing her fear. It was nothing, she stammered. A bad dream. I had a bad dream too. His thumb came up and brushed, very lightly, under her eye where James had hit her. The makeup was thick, but he felt the slight puffiness. His jaw tightened. A muscle ticked. He didn't remember who he was, but the instinct, the possessiveness, the rage at a challenge to what was his, was rising to the surface like a shark. Tell me, he commanded. It was not a request. It was the voice of Don Silvio. And in that moment, Elena knew the first layer of the shock was here. The man waking up from the dream wasn't just the boss remembering his past. It was the boss's true nature, emerging from the coma of amnesia, forged in the heat of her tears. He didn't remember his enemies, his empire, or his name. But he remembered how to be dangerous, and he had decided she belonged to him. He didn't let her go. He held her by her shoulders, his gaze locked on hers. "You will tell me now. Who was it? Was it one of the guards, a servant?" His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. It was the voice of a man used to being answered. Alina's mind raced. If she told him about James, what would he do? He was still weak. James had soldiers, guns, Don Paul's authority. Silvio would lose, and she would be punished worse than before. But if she lied, and he sensed it, she was trapped between two terrifying truths. "It was a dream," she insisted, her own voice trembling. "Just a dream. I'm tired, Silvio, please." He studied her face for a long, painful minute. The intensity in his eyes didn't fade, but it shifted. He seemed to decide something. He nodded once, a sharp movement. "All right." He released her shoulders but took her hand. "You will sleep here tonight, in the chair where I can see you." It wasn't a romantic suggestion. It was a security detail. He helped her into the large armchair by the window, tucked a blanket around her, and then went back to his own bed. He didn't sleep. She could see his eyes, open and reflecting the moonlight, watching the door, watching the windows, watching her. The next morning, the change in him was clear to everyone. The gentle, confused man was receding. He was quieter, more observant. He watched the guards, noting their patterns. He listened to Don Paul's reports on business with a sharp, analytical focus, asking short, pointed questions that made Don Paul hesitate. He was piecing together the world not through memory, but through instinct. And his instinct told him Alina was afraid of his own family. He started to test his power. At breakfast, he ordered James to bring him the financial ledgers for the past 6 months. James laughed, a nervous sound. "Don Silvio, you should rest. The numbers are boring." "Bring them," Silvio said, without looking up from his coffee. The tone made James stop laughing. He brought the books. Silvio spent the day with them, his brow furrowed. Alina sat nearby, pretending to read. She saw him circle discrepancies, his mouth a hard line. He was finding the skimming, the lies. The man who had been shot was a businessman, and he was auditing his own organization. That afternoon, he asked for a tour of the estate's security. James, sweating now, had to show him the camera feeds, the guard posts, the weak spots. Silvio pointed to a blind spot on the south wall, the exact spot Alina had tried to use. "Fix that," he said. James's face paled. "Yes, Don Silvio." The balance of power was shifting, and it made everything more dangerous. Don Paul's kindly mask began to slip. He saw his nephew becoming a ruler again, but one whose loyalty was tied to a woman Paul couldn't control. A week after Alina's failed escape, Silvio called her into his private study, a room he had just reclaimed from James. He stood by the window, his back to her. He looked strong in a dark sweater and trousers, every inch the lord of the house. "Alina," he said, "sit." She sat on the edge of a leather chair. "I had a dream last night," he said, still looking out the window. "Not a dream, a memory, a flash. I was in a club, loud music. A man was arguing with me. He had a tattoo on his neck, a snake. I was angry, very angry." He turned to look at her. "Do you know who that man is?" Alina's blood ran cold. A snake tattoo. She knew that tattoo. It belonged to Matteo, the enforcer for the rival Costello family. The family she had testified against. The family who had put a price on her head, which was why she was in witness protection. Her testimony had sent Matteo's brother to prison for life. "No," she whispered, the light ash in her mouth. "I don't know." He walked toward her, stopping in front of her chair. He crouched down, putting them at eye level. "You're lying to me," he said softly, not accusing, just stating a fact. "You've been lying since I woke up. I don't know why, but I know this. You are the only person in this house who is not trying to use my lost memory to control me. He jerked his head toward the door, meaning Don Paul and James. They want me to be a puppet. You just want me to be safe, even if you are afraid of me." Tears welled in Alina's eyes. It was the truest thing anyone had ever said about this horrible situation. "I don't care about the lies before," Silvio said, his voice a low murmur. "But no more lies now. I need to know who I am. And you are going to help me. Tell me about the man with the snake." She was breaking the Marshal's most sacred rule. She was breaking her own vow of silence. But looking into his dark, earnest eyes, eyes that held a glimmer of the man he was meant to be, not just the monster he was supposed to be, she cracked. His name is Matteo, she breathed, the name feeling dangerous in the air. He works for Vincent Costello. Silvio's eyes flickered. Costello? He repeated the name like a key turning in a lock. Something clicked. A wall in his mind crumbled a little. He stood up abruptly, packing. Costello, we have a dispute. Territory, the docks. He stopped, his hand going to the faint scar on his abdomen. He sent men. They ambushed me. He was remembering. The shock of it chilled Alina to the bone. He turned back to her, his expression fierce. Why do you know this? A nurse from a public hospital. How do you know a man like Matteo? This was it, the cliff's edge. She stood up, her legs unsteady. I have to tell you something, and when I do, you will hate me. And they, she pointed shakily toward the study door, they will probably kill me. He stepped closer. Nothing in this house happens without my say. Not anymore, tell me. So she did. In a rush of plain, simple words, she told him, not all of it, but the core truth. My name is Alina Rixai. I was a waitress. I saw Matteo's brother Carlo murder a man in an alley behind the restaurant. I went to the police. I testified. They put me in witness protection. I became Stella Rossi, a nurse. You were brought to my hospital. When you woke up and grabbed my hand, you said Alina. My real name. You shouldn't have known it, but you did. And your family. They forced me to come here, to pretend, so you would stay calm. She waited for the explosion. For the rage of a betrayed man, a mafia boss discovering an informant in his bed. Silvio was perfectly still. His face was unreadable. He processed the information piece by piece. The silence stretched, thin and tight. Finally, he spoke. You put a Costello in prison. Yes. You have a price on your head. Yes. My uncle and James knew this. They knew who you really were, and they brought you here, into the heart of my home, next to me. She saw the realization dawn in his eyes, more terrifying than anger. It was cold, calculating fury. They had used a protected witness as a toy. They had risked the wrath of the federal government for their own convenience. They had made his sanctuary a target. It was the ultimate disrespect, and it showed they saw him as a thing to manage, not a don to respect. He walked to his desk and picked up a small, old-fashioned brass bell. He rang it once. The door opened. It was not James, but an older guard named Leo, one of the few who had seemed to look at Silvio with genuine loyalty, not fear of Don Paul. Leo, Silvio said, his voice calm and clear. Bring my uncle and James to me, now, and then you will stand outside that door. No one else comes in or out. Yes, Don Silvio, Leo said, without hesitation, and left. Alina felt terror like she had never known. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment I woke up, he said. He opened a drawer in his desk and took out a pistol. He checked the magazine with practiced, casual ease, another memory returning, and set it on the desk. I am going to take back what is mine. Don Paul and James entered a few minutes later. Paul was smiling his kindly smile. James looked wary. Silvio, you wanted to see us, Don Paul said. Is everything all right? Alina, you look pale. Sit, Silvio said. He remained standing behind his desk. They sat. The atmosphere was ice. Alina has just told me a fascinating story, Silvio began, his hands resting on the desk near the gun. She tells me she is a federal witness against Carlo Costello, that she is in hiding, that you knew this, and that you forced her to lie to me and stay here. Don Paul's smile vanished. James went very still. She's lying, James spat. She's a little nobody trying to save her skin. Enough, Silvio's voice cracked like a whip. Uncle, look at me and tell me you did not know she was a pentita, a rat for the government. Don Paul's flinty eyes met Silvio's. The pretense was gone. I knew it was irrelevant. She served a purpose. She calmed you. Keeping her here also kept her quiet. It was a practical solution. A practical solution, Silvio repeated softly. You brought the eyes of the U.S. Marshals to my doorstep. You created a vulnerability that Costello would pay millions to discover. You disrespected me by using a lie as my foundation. And you, he turned his gaze to James, You laid hands on what is mine." James stood up, his chair scraping back. "Silvio, you're not well. You don't understand how things have been run while you were gone." "I understand that you are a disloyal dog," Silvio said, and then he moved. It was so fast Alina barely saw it. He didn't reach for the gun on the desk. He came around the desk in 2 strides. James went for his own weapon, but he was too slow. Silvio grabbed his wrist, twisted it with a brutal snap. James cried out as the bone broke. Silvio drove his other fist into James's throat, then swept his legs out from under him. James crashed to the floor, gasping, clutching his throat. Silvio stood over him, breathing calmly. He looked at Don Paul, who had not moved. "You are my blood uncle. For that, you get to leave. Go to the villa in Sicily. Live there quietly. You are retired. If you ever speak to anyone outside the family again or try to contact me, you will join James." Don Paul looked from his nephew's cold face to James, writhing on the floor. He was a practical man. He saw the power had solidified. He nodded once, stood, and walked out of the study without a backward glance. Silvio then looked down at James. He picked up his own gun from the desk. "You hit her. You threatened her. You tried to make me a fool in my own house." "Silvio, please," James choked out. Silvio looked at Alina. Her hands were over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. This was the man she had been afraid of. This was the reality. He looked back at James. He didn't shoot him. He said, "Leo." The door opened. Leo stood there, his face blank. "Take him to the warehouse. Make it clean," Silvio said. It was an execution order. Leo and another guard dragged the sobbing James away. The door closed. Silence. Silvio placed the gun back on the desk. He let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging slightly from the exertion. Then he turned to Alina. She was backed against the wall, shaking. The shock was here, in full, terrible force. He had remembered who he was, a violent, powerful boss, and he had just cemented his power in blood and fear. He walked toward her slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. He stopped a few feet away. "Now you know," he said, his voice tired. "Now you see the man I am, the man I was before the coma, the man I am again." She couldn't speak. "I remember more now," he continued. "I remember the clubs, the meetings, the deals, the violence. It's like watching a movie of someone else's life. But the feeling when I saw your fear, when I realized what they had done, that was mine. That is me." "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "You told me the truth," he said. "You could have kept lying. You didn't. You gave me the key to my own prison." He took one more step. He didn't touch her. "I owe you a debt, a life, so I will give you a choice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys and a thick envelope. He placed them on a small table next to her. "In that envelope is $50,000 in cash, a new passport, and a driver's license with a new name. The car outside is clean, untraceable, full of gas. Leo will take you to it, and you can drive away. Right now. You will have a head start. I will tell the marshals you escaped during a power struggle. You can disappear again for real." Her eyes darted from the keys to his face. "And the second choice?" "The second choice is you stay." His dark eyes held hers, no longer confused, no longer gentle, but fiercely, terribly honest. "You stay not as my nurse and not as a lie. You stay as Alina, as my advisor, my conscience. The one person in this world who is not afraid to tell me the truth. I will protect you from Costello, from the marshals, from everyone. The price on your head will vanish because I will make it vanish. But the price is that you stay in my world, with me." He finally reached out, but only to gently touch the rose, now dried, that was still tucked behind her ear from the garden weeks ago. "The man who woke up in that hospital bed believing you were his entire world. That man is still in here. He is just wrapped in the skin of Don Silvio. You can leave him, or you can stay and help him build something new, something better." He dropped his hand and took a step back, giving her space. He walked back to his desk and sat down, turning his chair to look out the window, waiting. The choice was hers. Alina looked at the keys to freedom, a clean escape, the life she was supposed to have. Then she looked at his broad back, silhouetted against the window. The man who had murdered for her, the man who had protected her, the man who was a monster and the man who was her only patient. They were the same person. She thought of the empty apartment, the constant looking over her shoulder, the life of a ghost. Then she thought of the terrifying, powerful, real man who had just torn down his own family to avenge a slight against her. The shock wasn't just what he did when he woke up. The shock was the choice he was giving her now. And the bigger shock was her own heart telling her what she wanted. She left the keys and the envelope on the table. She walked slowly across the rich carpet until she stood beside his chair. He didn't look at her. "I don't know how to be the conscience of a mafia boss," she said quietly. He finally turned his head. The raw hope in his eyes was almost worse than the fury. "I don't know how to be a man worthy of one, but we could learn." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of fire and blood. Inside the quiet study, Alina reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. A simple touch, a decision. He covered her hand with his own, his grip warm and sure. "Then we begin," Don Silvio said. "Did you make the right choice? Would you have taken the keys or stayed? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. For more stories where dangerous love meets impossible choices, subscribe right now. Your next obsession is just a click away.